put a smile on that face, Maria.
No morals in Croydon, is there? Anyway.
That is what I refer to as a frost blossom, when the temperature here is between 30 degrees and 32, where 32 is freezing. If there's enough moisture on the ground, these little frost blossoms form, and they just grow like crystals out of the undergrowth.
So if you could raise your hands using the Zoom hand raise feature.
Where is the Zoom hand raise feature? Reactions?
Yes.
Sorry, I can only see an option to recognize them or play a chime.
When you click on reactions, not the up arrow, but the reactions itself.
Raise hand, I got you.
Is to raise hand.
I guess I was looking for the same thing.
Indeed. The reactions, you press it, and one of the options there will be raise hand. You could keep your hand raised.
You just have a button below all the other icons. And now that I've raised it, my button says lower hand.
I don't know why I raised my hand.
Well, we're doing an experiment.
Oh, okay.
We're making
sure came in late.
That people know how to raise their hand, not give a reaction, but raise their hand in case during the presentation there's something that they want to raise. Right, okay.
All right, can we lower our hands or no? Mine's getting tired. Today's presentation is by Adrian Bell. It is on VBA Class Basics. Adrian is a Microsoft MVP and has been for quite a few years. It's approaching 10, isn't it?
Yeah, at the moment.
He's a moderator on bytes.com and posts as NeoPa. Do you pronounce that NeoPa?
Yes.
Okay. He's an administrator and has been a moderator and main contributor in Access and related topics for several years. His main interest is in building Access and other Microsoft applications, and he loves to automate using inbuilt features and VBA and dig into the bytes, literally. I know maybe last presentation or the presentation before, he was showing in the nitty and gritties, and it was way over my head in VBA. We'll call him a deep diver into that. Take it away, Adrian.
Thank you. I hope this one will be a very straightforward one. Basics of classes in VBA. Adrian Bell, NeoPa, hosted by Maria Barnes, and that's now. Okay. This is who I am. Basically what Maria just told you. I'm not going to stay on this too long. Why use classes? The reasons you want to use classes may vary. Classes are very powerful tools. Today, I'm hoping to go into the very basics of classes. You needn't expect to see anything overly complicated. Classes offer you a way to apply consistent themes, small t, to any part of your project. So you can do things in a consistent way if you consistently use the class that you designed to do whatever it is you want to do. You may decide to adjust the default behaviors of various access objects such as forms, reports, and even controls. I will show you how to do a form here, and if time allows, possibly even some reports, but certainly the main idea is the same across all of them, and I will show you one of those. Now, my offering is mainly for illustration of concepts. In other words, how do you use basics? What I'm showing you, what it does, it allows it like a menuing system, is not important, apart from the fact that you can understand the link between what's happening on the screen and what the code is doing. So, what my database uses classes for, it sets all forms into restored view. So I use multiple windows, as in not tabbed, and when a form is maximized, I think it looks horrible. And when a report is normalized, by which I mean it's in normal view, I think it's not making good use of the screen. So when I have a form, it's in restored mode, the size is exactly as designed. When it's a report, it fills up as much of the screen as possible. It will also hide the parent form after selection. So a form will have a button, you click on the button, it says, right, I've got to do this. It will open another form or open another report or more reports. It will hide the original form until that form or reports has all been cleared away, those forms or reports. It reshows parent form after selection complete, i.e. lower level form or last of the reports has been closed. And it also includes communication between objects. The calling or parent form rarely needs telling, but just in case. In other words, I've added this purely and simply to illustrate that you can do this. Okay. Now switch across for a very quick demo. So this is number 5. This is a simple menu. I can go into various submenus and I can exit. Okay. Now at the top level only, there is an illustration of communication between the calling and the called form. So if I go to menu A and then I say exit, it tells me immediately that frmMenu, which is the one I just opened, has just closed. Normally I wouldn't need to worry because if it's closed, I'm back with this. If it makes it visible, that's fine. I can interact with it as a user, or normally anyway. But in case you need that, that is available. Okay, now that one has another form. And you can see the other 2 levels of form have both been hidden. This is just to illustrate the concept. So escape out of there. If I go to menu A2, that doesn't exist. So this handles it by putting this message up on the screen. So you see frmMenu, which is this one, .ShowForm. I'm trying to show that form and it says, I tried, but it doesn't exist. So that's gone. Various of these are then all the same. So I'll click on there, same old nonsense. However, reports menu, I'll show this quickly. I've got a table which is just a list of error messages. Basically, doesn't really do anything, but it's got some data in. I've got 3 different reports here, report A, B, and C, and they all do different views of the same table. And then open reports A through C shows what happens when you do more than one at a time. So this is a report. You'll notice it's immediately gone into maximize view. And that's great. It's how many pages long? Quite a few. If I now close that, it recognizes that that is closed and it re-shows the form that opened it. On the reports one, it also has the report class giving the same sort of information back to let you know immediately that it's closed. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing here, but this opens 3 different reports. Okay, Control F6 switches between these 3 reports, report A, C, and B. Okay, now the form is no longer visible, so that's hidden away. I can close these and it doesn't matter which order I close them in. And it's only when the last one, and that's now the last one is closed, that then goes back to the form and shows it. That's basically all this does. These are different menus, pretty much the same thing, different sizes. The top left works, all the others don't. So it does all that. Switch across for a quick demo, done all that. Next one, before we proceed, there are certain things which they're not exactly unique to classes, but they are very important for classes, and they are the property set, get, and let. And I'll go through them. You'll see as I go what sort of thing it does. If you have, we'll start on line 8 here. This is a property get. And you'll notice that the code on line 12 is actually the usage of that outside of the class. So lung A equals x.y. long A is dimensioned as a long variable, and X is your class. So in your class, your code gets to see this not as X equals such and such or long A equals blah, blah, blah. It actually sees it as property Y. Can you see my mouse? I assume you can. That's property get Y as long. Now that tells that this Y property of the class is a long variable. Inside you say Y, which is your property name, equals lng var. Now you've previously defined lng var internally to the class. So this is an internal variable, which is also long. So when this gets run, the line 4 defines the get. Line 5 does what the get wants, and you end up with lng a equals x dot y. So x dot y turns out to be the internal lng var, which is inside your class. That is not generally available, but you're making it available by giving it a public property get. The set and let are very similar. Okay, set is for use with objects, and let is used for scalars, so ordinary values like long strings, etc. So I'll start with a set. In fact, I'm going to do a let because we've just seen lng var. This is the let. So going down to line 11, again, you've got dimx as your class. We are setting x.y equal to 326. Okay? What then happens is it goes up to line 4, and that is how it looks inside the class. You've got the property y, and the property let and the get, if they have the same name, they must match. So essentially, you've got two different ways of looking at the same property, but they have to match. And the value that you're passing is z. Notice that there's no parameters passed here. In line 11, you don't see anything that has parentheses. However, in VBA, that is converted to z as long in your property let. And then you say lng var equals z. And that z is the 326 in this case. That will then put that into your internal lng var. The outside code, the outside world, never knows that internally your lng var. It never has access to that. But it can have access through your properties to y, both in let and get. Now, the exception to that, not the exception really, the different way of doing that when you're working with objects rather than longs and integers, etc., is a set. If we skip down to the bottom again, dimx is your class, set x.y equals forms frmMainForm. Now, x is your class object, and y in this case is a property, but it is a form property. Okay, so when we say set x.y equal forms frmMain, that then gets passed up to line 4. Y is your form property, and z is also a form. So z is what forms frmMain is put into. Okay, so that puts the y property of your class equal to forms frmMain. And of course, that means that frmVar inside your internal frmVar is what is going to be set and store that value for now. Okay. I hope that is clear. If anyone has any burning questions, please raise your hand using the interface and we'll see that. I want an indication. Did we generally understand the concepts of properties and how they're used in class code? Excellent. What I should have asked, okay, please lower hands. What I should have asked, is there anyone who needs further clarification? Please raise your hand if you need further clarification. and then I skip quickly on before anyone has a chance. T. Jacoby, if you want to jump in very quickly then and ask your question.
Yes, I do use classes, but what I was taught from the person I took over from, what they do is they actually, when they do the declaration in your routine to define your class, they'll do something like dimension a variable as your class, say a lowercase c sample is an example we have. But then they'll do a set that variable as a new equals a new instance of that class. Then down in the code, instead of a simple set xy, then you'll do the set whatever that variable is dot the property. Is that old school and it's considered more efficient just to dimension that variable as the class?
No, I'm not. I am here illustrating the property set, let, and get. I'm assuming that there's other code in between. I'm not showing everything, just purely that which is necessary to understand set, let, and get. And
right.
What you're asking about, I don't think comes under that. Yes, I will cover that in my actual code. There will be, but I don't see that as directly relevant to this particular point.
Thank you.
My pleasure. No problem. Right, let's move on. Okay. Am I in the right window? I am now. Okay. So we're all happy with properties. I'm going to switch back across to the demo. And I'm going to look at the code. So we are in frmMain here. And I'm going to use the frmMainMenu, I beg your pardon. I'm going to use this one because it has an example of talking afterwards. There's an event that is raised afterwards. So this is fairly simple. This is just the form working. But notice at the top, it has, let me see if I can't do that. Let me do that. Private with events, clsTo as clsForm. To handle a class object, when you want to use events, and that's the important thing here, you have to specify with events. You can have a class object and you don't need the events, in which case you don't have to say with events. But in this case, we're going to have an event handler. Event handlers use the internal name for the name of the event handler itself. We've got a good example here. We have form underscore open. If I go in here, you'll see up in this box, the object is the form and the procedure, the event that it's handling, is the open event. So you have form underscore open. When you're handling a with events class, essentially form is a with events object. What you do is you come down here. Here's an example of one. And because we said with events, we now have another object defined in this list, which is outside of anything defined on the form itself. And this is a clsTo. I should explain, sometimes I call this parent-child, sometimes I refer to it from and to. I was going to change that to make it consistent. I didn't get round to finishing everything. So apologies for that. So this is clsTo. That will be the child form. And I want to handle when that's been closed. That is the event up here. So this code here that is highlighted this code is all the event handler of that. We'll come into that when we get there. But this is just to illustrate why this form is a little bit different from the others, because it calls something. And as you noticed when we showed it, it will handle the event and it will tell you which form has just closed. Okay, so we're going to come down into one of these. I'm going to open this one. Okay, and then we're going to look at what happens when we use the method of clsTo called ShowForm. So I did say B, didn't I? Yeah. So I'm going to click on B and it will come in here. I've got the clsTo defined. You'll notice, the one thing I didn't explain before, and I'll get back and do that now. T. Jacoby will be happy with this. When you have a WithEvents in your object, you can't say as new clsForm. If WithEvents weren't there, you could do it as new clsForm and that would be fine. You'd have your instantiated object. This isn't possible with WithEvents, which is why down here we have to set it to a new clsForm. That was something I had to change recently when I played around to make it handle events. Coming back. Okay, so this has already run. Form has already opened. All of this is, and also another thing which you'll come across later, clsTo.frmFrom, so that is the from, the parent, has been set to me being the object, the form that I am, which is frmMainMenu. So that is helpful because when we come to try and do anything, if that hadn't been set, nothing would work. But for now, I'm going to go into that procedure. Right. The first thing this does, okay, well, here we are. ShowForm is true. This isn't really important, but it returns a true or false whether it's succeeded or not. Assumes it will succeed, but it will reset that if it fails. Now, the next thing I do is I check for it initialized. Now, earlier we looked at setting the frmFrom to be me. Had we not done that, this would have run through here and said, is parent nothing? If parent is nothing, that's initialized would be false. But actually it worked. It would have sent an error message, nothing too drastic. So one of the first steps, if we're going to a form, we do a CMD restore. Now we try to open the form that has been specified. And we don't want to crash this if it fails. We just want to say, if it doesn't work, then we'll set frmChild. That will fail at that point. So come in here. Now, strTo is the name of the form. frmMenuB is the name of the form. We pass these extra conditions in case there is a need, but we don't actually have a need in this case. That's to make it more flexible. So we open that form. And if I go here now, you'll notice that frmB is open and frmMainMenu is also open. I won't be able to move that because the code is running and won't allow me to do that. But that is frmMainMenu. So far, this hasn't been hidden. Okay, so on error go to 0. We're going to set the frmChild, which is the 2, str2, to forms. That. Now we're going to say event prep. Right. This is important because when you handle an event from a WithEvents class or object, if that event isn't handled within the class itself, so for instance, a form here, we're handling the on-close of a form. Now, if that form had no form_close event handler set, then this would fail. Even though we want to do this, it would actually fail. It would ignore us. So to get that to work, we have to say .onClose equals conEP. I'm just going to show you this with a Shift F2 at the top. conEP is just that value. I think most of you will recognize that string. It is what is put in place when you have an event handler. Forms reports all sorts of events on all sorts of things. Right, Control Shift F2 to take us back. As it happens in this case, we have one that doesn't have an event handler there. So it doesn't handle its own onClose, but we want to. So we're going to say .onClose equals conEP. That means it should work. I could have shown you that what happens if it doesn't, but be easier to understand certainly if I show you first what it does. Now I'm going to very quickly switch across. We're still at that stage. If I then make that invisible, you'll notice that the original, the calling form, the parent, has now gone. So that is what happens when you open another form. Okay, now that's all very well. And what we want to do now is close this one. We could go into another one and close that, but I want to close this one because we know that when we close this one, it will work with the event that we're going to raise. So I want to do that. I'm going to do that again. And when I click it, I'm going to set a trap in there so that we get the code. This is clsForm. Now, one of the things I wanted to highlight here, we are in frmChild close, and that's fine. frmChild is a form, but it's not form underscore close. This is our handling of the events that come from our WithEvents object frmChild. So if I go up, show you that again, need to be in the code for that. So down here we've got these two lines. frmParent as form. Notice there is no WithEvents there. Private WithEvents frmChild as form. There is WithEvents here, and that is the frmChild is the internal name of the object, which is a form object, but it's our internal name. And that is what we use for event handlers. So it's the frmChild underscore close. Now, I'm going to put a breakpoint there before coming out of there. So we haven't done much. We've just clicked on that button and it's gone to that. Now, frmParent equals visible equals true. That's the first thing it's going to do. We're going to see that we get to that stage. frmChild.Visible equals false. This line is really only here to illustrate this. If you were to run it normally, you wouldn't need that line because this is only making it invisible before it closes. You're in the process of closing this object. It's already within that event. However, this is part of the event handler, so it hasn't completed the close until after this runs. But it gets a bit confusing if I then have other stuff coming up on the screen and that's still there. So I'm going to do that, and we then get back to just seeing that. But this code is still running. I'm going to say do cmd restore, in case anyone's maximized. And then str name is only here for passing that name back to the caller. So str name equals frmChild.name. We need that because at this point, we're going to set frmChild equals nothing. And if we try to get the name then, it will be hopeless. So we've got it stored here, frmMenuB. Now, we haven't talked about classes creating events. We've talked about classes handling events, but not so much creating them. So I will correct them now. Up the top here, or on the first page, I will go too far. Right. We are declaring here a public event called closed. And that is basically to let you know that the object handled by this class, so we've got a class which is a clsForm. We've got a class, it's handling a form. The form closes, that's one thing. The clsForm handles that close. But whoever called and created an instance of clsForm doesn't get that event. That goes to clsForm. Now we're saying we want to tell the caller or the parent that we are now closing. Okay, we're finishing. The form has closed. We're passing that on. So we've got public event closed, and it's going to take a byref parameter of the name of that form. Okay? Now, you can declare as many public events as you like. They don't happen until you use the RaiseEvent statement. So this is a RaiseEvent. The event it's raising is closed, and the parameter to pass, bear in mind this is a by-ref parameter, is strname. If I put my cursor there, you'll see what it says. Now I'm going to go here, bash, and this is the event handler we looked at earlier. And you don't have to have this event handler. I can't say that enough times. Just like with forms, there's loads of events that are provided. You can handle them if you want to, but you don't have to. You certainly don't have to handle all of them. You can handle some, but not others. So handling an event is optional. Again, I'll remind you, this is the internal name of the object that we've created, and the event is closed. And we've got, again, by ref strname as string. Now, in here, all it's going to do is format a message on the screen so that you recognize that it's actually that thing that's happened. Right? And what was happened before is this would run and the original called form would still be visible at that time, which looks messy. So this doesn't look so messy. But you know that frmMenu has just closed. So this isn't just random. It's specifically telling you which one has happened. Okay, now you end that event handler, and you then get back to the code immediately after the RaiseEvent. So this is still ongoing. This event, the child forms, frmChild's close event, is still ongoing. Until we come out of here, that doesn't get to close. But that's what we're doing next. That's done its close, except this is the frmMenu, so code is still running. It still hasn't closed. Now we come out of there, and we are back to where we started. I'm going to ask anyone now to put their hands up if they want to ask any clarification questions on any of that. Jerry.
Raise my hand in Teams or in Zoom.
That's exactly what I was hoping you'd do, Jerry.
Okay, good, great. So, yeah, my question is, so what are the brackets with the percentage sign with the F in that code? I didn't quite understand that.
Hang on, let me go back to the code. Right, brackets where?
On the close event, we were talking about this form just closed and this form just opened on the message box.
He's
It was part of
talking
a
about your
replace statement.
substitution characters, Adrian.
We're talking about this?
Yeah, right down below where it says, the brackets with the percentage sign F.
Oh, %F. Oh, that's
Yeah.
that is just how to create strings in VBA using replace. If I say replace, there's a standard function in VBA that is replace, and I use it very heavily for working with strings because it makes it easier to see, I feel, because you can see that it says form something just closed. Now, when we get to this parameter, it's %F, and it changes it with strname. So
Okay,
you
got
end
it.
up with
Yeah.
form frmMenu just closed.
Okay.
And for clarity, you could have used any string. You could have used form name as long as what you put in the second parameter was the same. The
Yes.
%F is just Adrian's. That's what he usually uses, like his standard or whatever.
Very
Right.
well expressed, Maria. Thank you. Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Right, you're all happy with that? Just want to make sure I haven't missed anything out. Blah, 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 blah. Class option calling module. Object. Interactive event. Good. Class with object. Blah, 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 blah. Let's get code define. Now, looking at the time, it seems to allow me to look at the report class. Often I don't get that time because I waffle on for too long. Most of it's exactly the same as a form. This is just a bit different because it allows multiple children objects to be opened, and it will handle the last one. It'll handle when the last one is closed, and how that works may be interesting. So again, we've got the conEP as event procedure. We have a different event here, which is all closed. If you have a form and an operator, and the form's visible, the operator clicks as and when they want to. The form generally doesn't need to know that all the reports have been closed. But should you need to, this shows how to do that. So we have a public event, all closed, which we will deal with later on. This is important. The way this is designed, it may be possible to do it a better way with arrays. The way this is designed is that I have a different object, RPT01, RPT02, and RPT03, which you can see below, handle for each potential object. I've said in here, I want to handle 3. If you want to handle more, you can increase that integer and add more objects and the property let sets that go with them and whatever, okay? And the array. Now, this one here is how I remember which reports are open of the ones that are called through this. This is a fixed length string. So it's not an array, but it says string times the number of characters. So str in use, in this case, will be a 3-character string. It will always be 3 characters. It doesn't get assigned. It's 3 characters long. Okay. Again, we have parent, and these are the children, RPT01. They are the internal names. Okay. We have frmFrom, setting the parent, as we've done before. Then we get RPT01, RPT02, and RPT03. I won't go into all. They're very similar, obviously, but you'll notice that the internal object name is RPT1. The external name, which is the property that is made visible to the other code, outside code, is RPT01. Okay? That has to be different. Right, initialized works the same way. Event prep works the same way. ShowReport is a little different. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get back to the code. And all of these have show reports in them. So the report menu allows me to open 3 of them. And I'm going to say, this will allow me to open 3. So I'm going to go here. I'm just going to handle the last one. Right. It's opened 2 of them already, and we'll look on the screen, and it's maximized. So we've got RPT A and Report A and Report B. So Report A, Report B, just those 2 open at the moment. This is the code to open the last one. Show report equals true, so it's fine at the moment. On error, go to error SR. There's an internal error handler. You don't need to worry too much about that. That's my other code, which isn't really relevant to classes. intIdx, that's an index, equals instra 1, str in use, VB null char. Now, what is this doing? This is saying I'm looking for a VB null char within my, remember this is currently 3, but obviously it can vary with if you want to change it. But this is my string of str in use. It starts with all nulls. And if I look at this now, you'll notice it's got 2 asterisks and that square is a null. So currently it's already been set to use 2 of the slots. This is saying, is there a slot available? Okay. And intIdx, if there were none left, it would be 0, which is why if it's not initialized or intIdx is less than 1, we raise an error, basically, and we give the conner message, maximum number of reports exceeded. This is not the case here. Initialized is fine. Oops. Well, we'll go through that anyway. I hit the wrong key. Right. Initialized is fine. So this you won't see much of. When you're tracing, if you echo something, let me show you on the screen. Down here where it says ready, this is where it will show what you echo. But when you're tracing, it doesn't tend to work very reliably because it's already gone. When it's running live, it would show. Now, if it is null var where, or var where equals blank, then we want to open that report without passing a where condition. If not, this is obviously designed to be flexible. If someone asked for that and wanted to put restrictions on it, then you'd want to include that in your report. Right. That has now showed report C. You saw the flash there. That was it working. Now I'm going to go to the bottom. Oh, I think that's too far. Right, let me go a bit more like this. That's up to the error handler. Right, on error go to 0. So we're now returning to standard error handling. Now, for this we want to set, if it's the first, if we want to match the intIdx, the index number, which we know is 3, and we want to set, naturally enough, we want to set RPT03 equals reports strRPT. So strRPT is the item passed to us. And we want to set RPT03 is that. And that's not good code because internally, I'm just going to quickly divert here, come back hopefully exactly where we were. No, my mistake. They are the internal names. Good. I thought I'd accidentally use the external name, which would mean having inside the class to use one of the class's properties instead of referring directly to the internal name. But we didn't. Right. So that has set RPT03. RPT02 and RPT01 are both set because they were set earlier when we weren't watching. Right. We do the event prep again, because we need to do it for this particular object. So we've now done the event prep, which we saw before. We're going to set the parent visible as false. This has already been done the first 2 times, so won't make a difference. And then we're going to set this mid str in use intIdx, 1. That is saying we're going to set the character there that is a null, the third character, as an asterisk. Okay. Hopefully you're all familiar with the ability to use the mid statement rather than the mid function, the mid statement on the left-hand side of an equals. That's what you can do. You can put a string into the middle of another string and it will overwrite. I'm going to say maximize. We're already maximized. Change the echo, report blah, 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 redo. We're not going to see that. Exit function. Right, it's now run all of these, and that's good. So we now have this situation. And I'm going to show you 2 things, if I can do it quickly. One is what happens when blah, 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 blah. Let me show this. Close CLS report. I'm going to show what happens when it tries to close when it's not the last one, and separately, what happens when it shows when it is the last one. So I'm going to show B and C. So first of all, I'm going to close A. No, I'm not. I'm going to close B. Because this is what happens the first time through. And it's going to say, right, I want you to call closReport function. And the report that you want is RPT02. And the index is 2. Jumps down to here. And we handle this. So I'm going to make it invisible. That means port B is no longer visible. It hasn't finished closing yet. And I'm going to set it to nothing. Okay. And then if you remember this str in use thing, I'm going to set intIdx 2. I'm going to set the middle one to a null. And then when we look at it, you'll see asterisk, null, asterisk. Okay. And this says, this next line, if str in use equals a string of the maximum number and all VB null chars, then. Now that's going to fail because it's only going to work when all the last of them has been closed. So that's going to fail. We're going to end if and out. So B has now closed. I'm going to close A because that's going to work in exactly the same way. And it's only when we close C we're going to see how it handles when there's none left. Okay, so we're back here, close report. This one is RPT 03 and index 03. Make that invisible. So we go here and we see nothing. RPT, clear that up to nothing. Notice now that there's only one asterisk left. Okay, so we run that and now there are no asterisks. It's 3 null chars, which is essentially the same as that. So when we say that, it says, yeah, that's right. So I'm going to say, and we were maximized, remember? I don't know if that still shows. It's hard to see there. But I'm going to go into restore mode. And with my parent, I'm going to set visible equals true. So the parent, the one that opened that, is now visible again. Select object, AC form name. I'm going to make sure it's the current object. It could be that other things have happened in the meantime. The user could be opening other forms, doing all various dodgy things. That makes sure that this form, the parent form, is the one that is available to the user. Now, RaiseEvent all closed. This is very similar to the closed one, and we looked at the definition up here. So hopefully you're all happy. Most of the code after this is only there to illustrate this. So if you want to do what I've been doing with maximize, restore, etc., you wouldn't need this RaiseEvent. However, I'm going to say RaiseEvent all close strParent. Now notice in this case, I haven't set strParent. This is to illustrate that when you raise an event, the event handler can change one of the values and it will then come back to the code that called that event, that triggered that event. So if I go in here, I raise the event, and in this handler, in the FRM reports, it's going to say, set str name as me.name. Now, you'll notice here we go, here's another one. This is a standard one you'll all be familiar with, cancel as integer. It's been created but not really set relative. Well, it would have been set to not cancel, false, but you can set that to true. And when you close, the calling code will see that that's true and take a different approach. It will take an approach that says, right, actually cancel that event, don't let it complete. So what we do here is we set that, and when we come back here, we'll notice that the strParent now is what has been set by the event handler, the parent's event handler. So strParent is FRM reports, and if it's set at all, so here we say, if they didn't bother to set it, we're not going to put a message. But in this case they have, so we pop this message out that you've all seen before. I'm just going to quickly summarize, and then we can look at any questions. And Maria, if you wouldn't mind at that point, letting me know which ones need to be looked at most urgently. So let's set get properties. Summary, what we just saw. Defining classes. Let's set get properties. Encapsulating. I didn't explain. I wanted to use the term encapsulating because class handling in VBA does not actually handle encapsulation. However, what we've seen is an approximation to encapsulation. It allows us to take a class that's already defined, like a form or a report, and make it do what it does, but some more as well. Okay, so that's what is encapsulating within VBA. It's not what a C++ program, for instance, would understand as encapsulation, but it's the closest approximation. We've seen handling the class's events, the events of the subclasses, and we've also looked at raising classes' own events, with communication. So we've been able to pass information backwards and forward. From other code, we've instantiated a class, and thank you for Teacher Kobe for pointing out the difference between private X as object and private X as new object. Instantiate class, set up prerequisites. We looked at when we use the class that I defined, we had to set the parent before it would be able to work effectively, and it checks that. With events, that's the with events keyword, but only if the class's events are used. I should say handled. So if you handle a class's event, you need to define it with events using the with events keyword. If you don't, as in with frmParent, it declares an frmParent, doesn't say with events frmParent, just says frmParent as form. Handling events from the class, we've also covered. There's some links of mine. This will be available to anyone who wants it. Upcoming AUG presentation on classes. This is from Kent Garrell. This is George's late. This is Pacific 1830 time. Thanks for coming. I'm going to leave that for now and ask Maria, is there anything in there that I need to look at particularly?
So there's not a lot of questions, but there are a couple. Neil has asked how you handle the toggling between the reports. Are you doing a tab key, or how do you toggle between those displayed reports, I think is what he meant.
Oh, how did I switch between them when I was in operator mode? Control F6.
Control F6.
Control function key 6. That will always switch. That's been an Office thing forever.
Okay, I was unaware of that, so good question, Neil. Ben wants to know what happens when a parent form is closed when a child is still open, and that's assuming that you're not opening the child forms as modal, so you can actually physically do that, although it's the parent's invisible, so you would have a hard time getting to it. But
that's my answer. You've just answered it, Maria.
Okay.
It's difficult.
You can't physically do that because you've made it invisible until the last child is closed.
Last one for reports, but the only one for forms. But yes, that's essentially the answer.
Okay. And then Crystal makes a comment that kind of leads into a question of mine. She mentions that all close seems useful for related reports, and she sees ways to expand it, but perhaps more importantly, it's a good reason to use a class. So my kind of question comment is, I don't regularly use classes, and obviously you don't need to use a class for a form or a report because they're already built-in ones, although using them has some advantages that you've illustrated here. What other kind of things or areas do you find that using classes is better than not, I guess?
That's a very good question, but one of the things I've tried to make very clear on here, and I will try and answer your question in a minute, but I'm not here to get into the complex stuff. And I see a number of people on here who probably know everything I'm saying and more. I'm here to help people understand that they can get into classes easily. Having said that, also, I have to admit that I haven't been a big user of classes. I just became aware quite recently that so many people, it was like, that's black magic. I don't want to touch classes. It's far too complicated and difficult. And I wanted to do something to allow them to change their mind. Give them something to play with, an example database that's already done, something with some very basics in there. I don't have a great deal of examples myself. There are other talks coming up. Kent's, for instance, that I showed a second ago. Let me see if I can go there. I think Kent will get into far more detail on that and give reasons and examples of other uses of classes. I'm a little bit lackluster in that effect because I haven't used them a great deal.
Okay, fair enough. So I would invite the other attendees, if any of you have used them a lot, what kind of example, like Neil suggests, he can offer a good example when only a class will do. Can you share that with us? Can others put in the meeting chat the kinds of things they've used classes for that have worked wonderfully?
Yeah, the example I was given was that for many years, I used Outlook to send an email. And what you do in Outlook, you follow the example that Microsoft wrote donkeys years ago in the knowledge base, and you use send object, you get Outlook to actually display the message, and then you use the send, and it sends it off. And one of the things that happens with Outlook is when you send an email, the email you've just sent gets destroyed and moves to the sent items folder, or it might be sitting in the outbox. You don't even know where it's gone because it might be still in the outbox and not made it to the sent items folder. So it's difficult to know if the user actually sent the email or whether he actually quit and didn't send it at all. And for years I struggled with that, and then I realized that what you can do is I created a tiny little class called a listener. I called it a listener, and what it does is it hangs on the Outlook event for sending the item. And before you display the item to the user for them to edit it in Outlook and then send it, you hook in effectively to the send event, and then your listener class, after the user either sends the email on having edited it, the event pops up and you get a glimpse of the email that the user has edited. So if he's changed the subject or who he's sending it to it, or he's spell checked the document, you can actually grab what he sent after he's edited it rather than the template you gave him before he edited it. And I found that really useful. And that was just a good example of where you had to write a class and all it did was listen to the send event of the Outlook message. When you went to send the message in your Outlook code, you hooked onto that event, and then that fired in your application after Outlook had finished sending the user's email, and you could grab a copy of it. So you got a copy of what they sent, not what you invited them to edit.
Awesome. Thank you. Looks like a couple of others. People also put up some examples. Eric put one up about using a class to model a domain item. For instance, an application that collects data from an Excel file, and you can have some more information about that file in a class, and methods to like read, write, and process the data in the file. T. Jacoby uses classes for working with tables. Again, similar, so he can have different properties and events to do updates, inserts, deletions, that kind of thing. Crystal, I'm not quite sure what your comment is about. You're suggesting using them to help do more interesting things with combo boxes. Is that?
Well, that was
gist of it?
actually directed at Neil because he has done some amazing stuff, and I'd love to see him come and do a presentation for Access Lunchtime.
On combo boxes and what he's done with classes?
I think that would be a good one.
Okay. Well, Neil and I are going to talk offline. I have private messaged him here about an upcoming presentation. So we'll see what we can work on there. Any other questions that people have in general for Adrian?
I did find a question from Phil Foulis.
Okay, thanks.
And it was about, let me see if I can find it again, not the sometimes paper and pencil works better. Setting a fixed length string, does that really help unless you're running out of memory stack space? Phil, did you end up understanding why I used a fixed length string And do you need me to explain that further, or did you like find out afterwards, or are you still a bit confused as to why? Phil doesn't have audio, I remember now. Combo boxes will be great. No, I think you did a good job. Thanks. Right. Okay. So you're happy that it wasn't about space. It was about, it's like an array. You can treat it like an array, but it's easier to access things. There we go. Build a mail class. Yes. Okay. So you take over, Maria. I can be here for another half an hour if you want to let things run onwards.
I do want to mention that the next Access Lunchtime would normally be, it's always the last Tuesday in the month, which in December is actually the day after the Christmas holiday. And I understand that might not be something that you celebrate, but there are a lot of things going on that time of year. So I'm going to opt to cancel that Access Lunchtime. So we will not have a December presentation, but we will resume again at the end of January. And I am still working on details for the speaker in January. I'm pretty sure I have a February speaker lined up, but she's not yet given me all the info to publicize that. Then we're open for speakers March, April, and May before we break for the summer. So if you've got something in mind that you'd like to talk about or know someone, have them contact me. Otherwise, we will see you all hopefully at the end of January.
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Adrian. This was an awesome discussion. Does anyone yet need the download link again? I posted it a couple times.
Maria, I sent you a zip file.
Oh, so in the zip, it has the presentation as well?
Yes.
Very, very smooth, Adrian. You covered a lot of stuff. I guess I'll watch the video a few times.
I tried not to go too quickly, Crystal.
Well, you did go fast, but I'm going to be watching it a few times, so it'll sink in.
Yeah, my comment on that is that most of us will probably go through this multiple times before it all starts to congeal. And unfortunately, Adrian is available.
Yeah,
all the time, and others to help clarify. I'm looking forward to hearing what Kent has to say, but down the road, other follow-ups on classes.
Yeah, I think Kent's presentation will be really, really great. And although he's not here because it's the middle of the night for him, I'm sure he'll watch this before he does your presentation in January, George.
Yeah.
I did want to make it clear that I'm very happy to receive and deal with any questions if anyone has them on this. I think my email should be in that file somewhere.
Thank you, everyone. Looks like James has his hand up. James, do you have a question? Or you're clapping? Sorry.
That was a clapping symbol. But, just one question, if anybody has any interesting code on passing arrays in classes, to the forms, like string, open args is, string, but it would be nice to pass arrays around, and wonder if anybody has dealt with that.
I use a string, but I establish some kind of character that I use to break up my arguments, essentially, like a semicolon.
Sure.
And then I have a routine that I create that parses that out into that array that I call from there. So it's kind of like that, but not.
Right. I've used that a lot, but still just to pass, an array of single numbers.
I use it
into the form.
Ken gets his tags class from his book from donkeys years ago. I use it for arguments into reports and forms and between forms, and that's quite a good thing. That's probably my first understanding of how classes work. Do people know?
Can you repeat the name, Neil? Was it
Ken
Ken?
Getz. Ken Getz. He was
Okay.
like the guru of Access 2000. And
Okay.
he wrote some of the first major books in Access. And in his early books, he presented a class which he called the tag class. It's a thing which basically turns a string that you can hang on the tag of a control or as an argument to a form, and it breaks it up into variable equals value pairs, basically.
Are you talking about a collection type thing?
Yeah, it's just it was used an awful lot sort of in early access a long time ago. I adopted that and I still use it all the time, really. It's great, really. What you do is you just put a variable name equals a value and a semicolon, and it concatenates those into strings, and it breaks up the strings into an array and then breaks each of those up into a value equals pair.
A little bit like JSON.
Yeah, very much. It's just string handling in Access. There's no reference or library.
There's a comment from Philippe Stivel. Did he come and go?
Yeah, he was here earlier.
He was here. I don't think he stayed to the end. Which it doesn't. I mean, it's not like I'm going to teach him anything about classes. So that's fine. To be honest, there are a number of people here that I feel would not benefit. It was at a very basic level. And I know that there are people that have done this and more. It was more to try and encourage people to include classes in their thinking when they're planning projects and stuff, who hadn't before.
I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. I think I see this as sort of laying the groundwork for a lot of people to move forward. You can't just jump into the deep end.
I think with classes, the way they work becomes obvious if you've got a broader and deeper understanding of early coding practices, and you can see where they've come from. And people that are coming to Access haven't got that. It's very daunting. It's a bit frightening.
Most people that are in Access do not come.
That's right. And you presenting at this level was very valuable for that.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
Is what I'm saying. I thought it was very good the way you presented it.
Thank you. Thank you. I had to try and focus on keeping away anything that was complicated and anything more advanced. Clever stuff, essentially. Try and keep clever stuff away and just go on the basics as much as possible. There was some logic in there to do what the class was there to do, but I tried to keep that to pretty much a minimum.
That was good.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job at that, Adrian. It really helped clarify that there's really not a lot required for a class. You know, just a few things are required. You can get much more complicated than that, but it helps you understand how it works when it's very simple like that.
One of the other things I'm very pleased that I got in, even though it was more of a side issue, is how when you've got code running, particularly on like a close event, that close event, it says, right, I'm closing now, except it doesn't close until the last bit of code that's related to it is closed. So you close a form. If it's got a form underscore close event, it won't close while that's still running. Now, if you're tracing, that becomes more important to understand because you slow your code down, obviously, when you're tracing. But yeah, I think that was something that I was pleased to have included.
Okay, well, I think I'll let everybody go here and we'll end the meeting. Again, thank you very much, Adrian, for your wonderful presentation and simplifying this. And you do need to keep in mind that even though we had 30 people here and maybe half of those already understood classes, there's going to be a lot of people that watch your video here that have not, and it will be a first time learning for them. So the title will attract those people. So,
well, Crystal helped with that. I was going to call it.
Yes, she will. Our wonderful video editor.
Yeah, indeed.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Great to see you all.
Thank you all.